So today I would like to talk about when meditation and spirituality actually hinders healing rather than helping it. When it takes you further away from yourself and from your emotions than connecting you more to yourself and your emotions, which is a very important topic as meditation and spirituality continue to grow. It's really important to know about their limitations or some caveats around them. So I'm going to take a slightly more critical stance in this video, but a little disclaimer, none of what I'm going to be talking about is kind of bad or wrong in some ultimate sense. It's just that, meditation and spiritual approaches, they're all perspectives. They all have limits. No one technique or path is going to cover everything. And it's just really helpful to know what those limits are so you can find the right meditation or spirituality for you. And you can keep, adding strings to your bow as you're going along your healing journey, right? And very often to spirituality and meditation, it's like, oh, it's just all good, just do whatever you like. No, it's actually, there are very real limits, and certain techniques or approaches are not going to be appropriate for you if under certain circumstances, which we'll talk about. So I'm actually going to start this video kind of backwards and talk about what a really deep and, for me, real spirituality would give you, and then contrast it with some of the cases in real life where that doesn't happen. So most importantly, it doesn't exclude any part of yourself, right? So if there's certain thoughts you have, feelings you have, patterns of behavior you have, in that moment, those are true parts of you in some way, even if you don't like them or want to change them. And it's important that we don't exclude any of those. Secondly, it tends to be a via negativa. By that I mean it's a path of subtraction. So you don't tend to generally be adding loads of new stuff to you, new beliefs, new rules, new identities, new roles. This will happen a little bit here and there, that's fine. But on balance, you want to be letting go, emptying yourself out more. So you're emptying yourself out of certain beliefs and identities and roles and rules. This doesn't mean that anything goes in the world, but they're not part of your psychological makeup and the structure of your being. It's much more about direct experience, like what's going on here and now, than, the being, the consciousness that you are in this exact moment. Again, this is it's emptying you out of stuff more than it is filling you up. Another point is that it will always point you back to your own sovereignty, to yourself. So it won't be, on balance, taking more power away from you than it gives back. If someone's saying, oh, this guru or this god has the answer and you just have to worship them, to me that's a less favorable sign than if they're pointing it back to you. It's like, who is the meditator? Who is the one on this spiritual path? Another good sign is that it's all about your relationship to your experience, not the contents of experience per se. So the contents of experience might be, anger as the emotion of anger that you have, or certain thoughts that you have, or certain ways you behave, certain desires you have. It's not about controlling those or judging those. It's about how you relate to all those different things. And good teachers of meditation and spirituality will help you to change how you relate to these parts of yourself in a way that helps you to grow and develop and reach deeper truths, rather than, for example, condemning or judging them and, getting too worked up about the content of experience per se, which doesn't really matter that much. Another couple of points, it tends to include places that we don't want to go. In fact, that's often the edge of our growth curve, is precisely in those areas of ourselves, of the world, that we don't want to look at. An example might be, where is the tendency to violence in ourselves? Nothing to do with actually being violent, but just looking objectively at that tendency within ourselves, or certain, desires we might have that aren't, socially acceptable. It's like, actually, when we get real and authentic and vulnerable about those things in the right context with the right people, that can be a place of real growth, rather than denying or controlling those. Finally, again, this sort of real, quote, real path of spirituality will empower you to meet your needs on a human level. So you won't be sort of asked to do things you don't want to do, which would be a violation of your own boundaries in service of some other, apparently greater cause, for example. Or it won't, they won't ask you for loads of money in some inappropriate way so you can stay at their ashram or whatever it is. Or sort of, guilt you or guilt you into doing things that you otherwise wouldn't do, for example, as you hear in some of these stories of abuse at various ashrams and things. So it really empowers you to meet your human needs. It doesn't dismiss those or subvert them to someone else's, for someone else's gain. So with that in mind, let's talk about a few of these areas where meditation and spirituality can take you further away from your emotions and yourself. Firstly, this is when you're traumatized, right? This is a place where you've got to be careful with meditation. If you've experienced a lot of trauma, there could be a lot of overwhelming energy and emotional content that's just under the surface, or maybe writhing around on the surface. Or the flip side, you could be very shut down, very numb. And in both cases, just sitting in meditation with numbness or with overwhelm is not productive. That's going to bed those states in even more deeply. To meet those, you need much more nuance and care and bringing in a lot more safety. You have to be much more sort of proactive and very specific about how you work with those parts to make sure that the person is safe, right? For example, when I first started meditating, I went on this Vipassana retreat and I was very numb in my body. And I just ended up, looking back now, I can see that I was just sitting with this frozen body for, 10 days. And I was just incredibly miserable because I was just sitting in this dull, disconnected place and expecting something to happen. And throughout the 10 days, nothing did. It wasn't what I needed at that time. I needed much more loving, warm care to safely reconnect me to my body and then do a Vipassana retreat. There's also this expectation of stillness we have. When it comes to meditation and spirituality, it's our expectations that run us aground. This idea of this Zen person sitting in meditation and stillness. And what's that? So when stuff starts coming up in us, emotional content, we're then going to think, oh, this is bad, this is wrong, I'm doing it wrong, it shouldn't be going like this, right? In fact, that's completely the contrary. That's a good sign that emotional content's coming to the surface. That's you're opening up and that the conditioning is coming up to be processed. But because we have these expectations, we might reject or push that part down, or just simply meditating in stillness over years and decades will just actually really numb us out to our body in a way that feels kind of okay. It feels like we're calm and still, but there's a kind of if you know what real calmness and real stillness, it's on the other side of all of your pain and all the emotions and all the carnage and stirring up everything. When you've stirred up everything and gone through everything, there's a real calmness on the other side that's juicy and alive. And when you just deny and reject it, you have this very dry, stale calmness, which it's just, if the alternative is overwhelm, it feels quite nice, but it's nothing like the real deal. Meditation can also help us stay out of the body as much as it can connect us to the body if you're not careful, particularly with more awareness-based or transcendental meditations. You're often told to ignore the body. Maybe you're told, oh, you're not the body. Whatever happens with the body, just keep observing from awareness, this kind of thing. And you can really easily just dissociate and disconnect from your body and your emotions in this way. If you haven't worked already to build that connection and open yourself up. I remember there was one teacher, I can't remember, an Indian teacher, very well known, I can't quite remember his name, criticized sort of Western meditation teaching, saying, disidentify from the body, don't dissociate from the body. You have these Hinduistic teachings very present in Advaita Vedanta, for example, that talk about, oh, you're not the body, and it's led many people to just dissociate completely from their body, which is very unhelpful. Similarly, a lot of meditations encourage you to transcend your experience, which is, it's a positive instruction insofar as it goes. There's a very real reason why you want to sort of deny experience, because when you block out experience, you go to that which is the invisible experiencer of experience then becomes more evident. And that's one important aspect of enlightenment, is grasping the nature of that ultimate subject, the ground of all experience. By rejecting experience, you make the ground of experience more clear. But for certain people, they're going to misuse that instruction, or it's just not going to be appropriate for where they're at. It's quite an advanced technique. And back in the day, 5,000 years ago, that kind of teaching would have been reserved only for very, highly skilled adepts of meditation who had already, very connected to the body, would have worked through a lot of conditioning. And then you can give them that kind of instruction and it'll work. With someone who's completely new to meditation or pretty new, they're just going to end up denying their body and their emotions and so on. And come up with all sorts of beliefs about how they're not the body, and it's going to be an absolute mess. The general mistake here, and the way around this, is that do not detach or disidentify from some aspect of your experience before you fully owned it. So if there's some anger, don't go, oh, that's not me. Fully own and allow the anger. Let it. If it's not you, you can let it completely take over, right? And when I say completely take over, I don't mean like lose control. I mean fully allow it to be itself. Fully feel it. So we want to own all these aspects of ourselves before we start disidentifying and detaching from them. That's a surefire way to make sure you don't fall into that trap. So with spirituality now, the reason and the way this can take us further away from our emotions and our healing path and ourselves is that if we're not on that path of emptying ourselves out, we tend to gravitate towards taking on beliefs and worldviews and perspectives and ideas, not because they're true, but because they appeal to an unconscious, unmet need, right? Humans are very, very good at taking on beliefs and worldviews. You may notice this. If you look around the world, you'll notice absolutely everyone has completely divergent experiences or worldviews and perspectives and beliefs. And they're completely convinced that theirs are true. So you could take people who are Muslim or Christian or atheist or agnostic or who are deep on a spiritual path, who are maybe like New Age versus Buddhist versus like more psychedelic approaches. Like they all have completely different perspectives. Or go back to the Egyptians, the gods they believed in, or the Aztecs, or who knows what, the Neanderthals, their worldview, or tribal animistic worldviews. Like we have so many perspectives and beliefs. This is humans are so good at taking these on and developing these. And the main reason they exist is not because they're true, it's because it helps us form a stable worldview where we know what's left and what's right and what's up and what's down, and so we know how to respond. And if we all share those views together, we can have a cohesive society on the basis of that. So it tends to, there's also another reason. For example, I read these studies about how people who have more trauma are more likely to take on and believe in conspiracy theories. Why is this? It's because there's some wound in those people that theory meets. It helps them to understand or feel like they're right. They understand something. They have some control, something in that direction. It's not because the conspiracy theory it's true, it's because it helps meet that unmet need. And you can see this with spirituality as well. So I'm going to list a few sort of ideas or beliefs. I'm not saying these are right or wrong. I'm saying that the reason people are taking them on more often than not is probably not because they've directly ascertained the truth of them. It's probably more because it sounds good to some part of them. Like past lives, for example. A lot of people take that on, never having had an experience of a past life, or having directly experienced a lot of evidence or done a lot of rigorous research into it. They just go, oh yeah, that sounds right. It could just be the fear of death. They have this this real fear of death within them, and the past lives, they take that on and it makes them feel better. Or starseeds, for example, is this sort of new age trend towards this understanding that you're actually from another planet and you've been sent to the Earth to sort of heighten or raise the vibration of this planet. Which, again, I don't know. I remain open-minded. But there's definitely people out there who take that on because it makes them feel more special. They feel, there's some deep wound of shame or feeling worthless. And very understandably, they come across this worldview that makes them more central, more important. And naturally they take it on. Or there's another one, maybe they have a fear of not knowing, and you might want to latch yourself onto a guru and give everything away to this guru, but absolutely believe everything that he or she says without putting it through your own judgment. And again, these are ways of making life easier. You can take off the burden of responsibility of figuring out what's so for yourself. And you see this, and this runs into issues. This is precisely where you get abusive situations where someone's giving themselves over to a guru, and then he or she starts taking more, crossing someone's boundaries, but they're already too deep. And so they find it very difficult to say no. There's also similar things going on when it comes to language around like different parts of ourselves. So do you remember how I talked about how you don't reject any part of yourself in sort of a real spirituality, quote unquote? In certain circles, for example, they talk a lot about stale energy or blockages, or they might view anger or certain emotions as unspiritual or certain desires as unspiritual. Like in the commandments, there are certain rules for, and in Judaism, they have a whole, in the more sort of Orthodox Judaism, they have these big, 600 and something odd rules for how to be a good follower of Judaism. And these, in my opinion, are sort of labeling certain aspects of yourself as unspiritual, unwanted, bad, wrong, and trying to get rid of them. Like in yoga class, they're like, just breathe out all the stale energy. It's like, no, that's a part of you. That stale energy is some wound from when you were a kid and you didn't get enough love and you're just trying to throw it out. That's not how I would approach things. There's also in spirituality, often people need specialized support. There's a lot of people who are very wounded and very traumatized, frankly, who turn to spirituality and meditation because of the promises it gives of healing oneself, becoming whole, feeling better, and living the life that you want. Understandably so. And those things, they've given me so much. They can do that. They literally can. They have done for me. Crazy as it might sound, but for many people, they need more specialized support. You need more trauma support, trauma-informed care or services or offerings. Or some people, if they've got addictions, for example, they might need to go to rehab first. Or if someone's in a toxic situation, they're in an abusive relationship, they need to get that relationship sorted out first before they start, going off into highfalutin transcendental realms. There are some basics you've got to get sorted on Earth first before you go up to higher realms. You know what I mean? And spirituality doesn't always cater for that. And I find that in general with spirituality, as in all other areas of life, like be it politics or whatever else, we tend to gravitate towards those beliefs and ideologies that make us feel better, that we are subtly attracted to. And this could be on a very unconscious level. You'll probably deny it if asked straight out, but it's tapping into some deep unconscious need. And I feel like often some popular teachings, they play into our egos in this way. They know exactly what they're doing. They're pushing people's ego buttons. They know what people want to hear. All egos want, safety, approval, control, to feel special. And if you promise people those things in various ways, preferably without too much work, you'll get an audience. But this is taking people further away from where they need to be, in my opinion. There might be some good stuff in these teachings. I'm talking in very broad terms here, but you should be a little wary. The consequences of all of this is that we end up denying and rejecting many parts of ourselves, right? In meditation, we're pushing away that anger because of our spiritual beliefs. We're denying that we have certain desires, or we're pushing down our own dreams and goals because our guru has told us to, or whatever it might be. And this can only lead to fragmentation. The path to wholeness is always a welcoming. It's always a welcoming of all the parts of you. That's the only way it can be. That's what love is, accepting things as they are. You have to love yourself. You have to accept the parts of yourself that are here. This isn't to say they can't transform or change. They will, but only when you accept them in the first place. Then, most obviously, you're still suffering right? So you're trying to go to meditation or spirituality because you're suffering, and if you're doing it this way, it's not going to be as effective. If you're not getting what you need, it's not going to work for you. You also end up with this phenomenon called Zen devilry, being a Zen devil. This is when you sort of half-ass your enlightenment. So you've had some transcendental insights, but they're not embodied. So you can't really live what you've experienced in the world. And people in this case, can end up very arrogant or aloof, thinking they've sort of got all the answers, but they're actually still really defensive or passive aggressive. There's still loads of pain in them that gets projected out because they're kind of not taking responsibility for it. They're denying the worldly side of things and therefore not taking responsibility for their pain. And so it gets put on everyone else around them in all kinds of ways. This is Zen devilry. And ultimately, you're still fragmented, split, and fundamentally immature. If you're not taking responsibility for your stuff, if you're denying certain things or trying to fit yourself into certain boxes, it's going to be tricky. It's not going to work out so well. So again, what do you do to actually get closer towards healing, closer to your emotions, while still doing your meditation and spirituality? So firstly, you want to own your experience and all the parts of you before you disidentify with them. I mentioned that already. Secondly, be wary of beliefs. Beliefs aren't helpful. Direct experience is very helpful. Go and find out what's true in your direct experience. That will do you a lot of good. Just taking on a bunch of beliefs without verifying them yourself is going to be tricky. So that brings us to the next point: is don't just believe people. Don't just believe people based on reputation or, well, he's got a funny hat, so he must be telling the truth, or on their the institution they're part of. Go and verify everything for yourself. By all means, listen to people. Take on what they have to say as possibilities and suggestions, or this could be true and that could be true, and then go and verify it for yourself. If you meditate, you'll get enlightened. Let's see. Let's go have a look. And lastly, generally speaking, spiritual growth, not always, but generally tends to be in the places we don't want to look. Because that's how we expand our sense of self, by bringing into it those parts which we reject or that felt threatening or unsafe. This isn't to say it has to be some macho thing where you're just trying to meet all your fears or do anything crazy, but it's just bit by bit you just slowly turn towards your blind spots, your shadow, your unconsciousness, places in the world where you're not quite living in integrity. Or just being bored, sitting and meditating and just sitting through some boredom. You don't want to do it, but sometimes you need to do it. It's this kind of thing. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I help people one-on-one with this stuff, with somatic therapy to feel and heal more deeply, specifically by welcoming in all the parts of themselves. And if you want some help, then you can book an intro call with me. Otherwise, I'll see you later. Bye.